Yes, hello once again, welcome back to Classic Dirt Bike TV, and as you can see we're back here in the comfort of the CDB TV studios after our recent jaunt across the Irish Sea to cover that two-day charity event over there in Northern Ireland. So I hope you've enjoyed all of those bikes and all of the racing footage that I posted from that fantastic charity event. Now in this next video I'm going to show you one of the bikes that I captured during my paddock walkabout, and this particular bike is of course not a fully original bike from its year, but nevertheless it's still a very interesting looking motorcycle. So let's jump straight into that video and take a look at Adrian Lappin's 1986 510 Twinshock Husqvarna. Okay, so in this featured video we're going to take a look at Adrian Lappin's very nice 510 four-stroke Husqvarna, and if you've been watching all of the racing highlights from the 2023 charity scramble event from Northern Ireland, then you may have already seen this bike in action on the track. So in this video here we're going to take a closer look at some of the parts that make up the bike. Now naturally of course the bike never looked anything like this condition that you see it here when Adrian first bought the bike, because he's had to do quite a bit of work to get it up to this standard, but as you can see it's all been very worthwhile in the end, as it's turned out looking superb and almost ready to take to the track. Now in this picture here, this will give you just a little insight as to what the bike looked like just before Adrian purchased it, and this was a picture that was taken by the previous owner of the machine, but you can see how radically different it was back then. And so as we begin with the bike's chassis, which as you've probably by now guessed is a later Husqvarna chassis from a 1986 TC model, which in that year was a much more modern monoshock based frame with the single shock rear suspension on the back. Now, just as to what kind of work was required to change the chassis from the more modern monoshock to this older twin-shock configuration, I'm not exactly sure, although I'd expect that the bulk of the engineering would be concentrated on the removal of the mounts that would have held the single shock suspension in its place, because it's basically just a process of engineering new top mounts on the 86 chassis and then positioning and welding bottom lugs onto that alloy swing arm to take the brand new pair of twin shocks. But it certainly looks like Adrian's made a decent job of the swap, because it all looks very well engineered, because I know that in the past when I've posted similar videos of these kind of monoshock to twin shock swaps, that viewers have been known to scowl and even sneer at these kind of upgrades or downgrades if you like, but often they just can't get their heads around as to why anybody would want to cut up a perfectly good modern monoshocker to make it into a twin shocker. But for me personally speaking, I still like this bike, even although it still has these black wheels. So as we move on to our big Husky's power plant, which as I said is a big single cylinder 510 four-stroke motor that has the familiar twin port cylinder head, and certainly enough power and grunt to satisfy even the very best and quickest of thumper pilots. Now of course with a big engine you need a sizable carburettor to feed that engine with its fuel, and in Adrian's case here it looks like it's a big Italian Dell'Orto that's been chosen to supply all the gas that this big 510 engine requires. Now, I'm not sure as to what would have been bolted onto these big TC engines back in the day, but this Dell'Orto certainly looks like it's up to the job. But some of the other upgrades fitted onto this 510 motor is that it's been fitted with the newer type crankshaft, and the lubrication system on the engines also been modified just to let oil feed onto the back and the front of the piston, which incidentally this motor's cylinder also has a nickel coating on its alloy liner inside this barrel. Now again, the clutch basket on this engine has the bigger and stronger type of basket fitted, and on the outside it also has the two-piece clutch cover, so as that you don't have to completely remove the entire casing to inspect or do any maintenance on the clutch. Now, once more on the Sparks ignition side of the motor, this unit's been taken from a much more modern 570cc Husqvarna Enduro type engine, which I expect will provide much better ignition parameters and sparks than the stock 510 unit. But Adrian did tell me that he had to do some extensive work on this 86 frames airbox, but what that work actually entailed he didn't really say, but I expect that it was something to do with the rerouting of the exhaust pipe that ran down the side of the frame, which more than likely probably would have been a bit of a nightmare to get it just right. But without doubt, if you're into your big thumper motors and these big 510s in particular, then you'll already know just how awesome and powerful that these engines can be. But even then, most four-stroke racers are still not content with just having the 510 cc's, and occasionally they go ahead and bore these engines out to 570 and even beyond. But again, these old 510s were the last of the big air-cooled Husky thumpers, just before Husqvarna then decided to move into water cooling on their future Husky models. And so at the front end of our big thumper, we still have the self-same stock Husqvarna forks that would have been fitted onto the 1986 chassis, although of course these would have had a much more modern hydraulic disc brake fitted here at the bottom, which would have not been eligible for twin shock racing. So this has been swapped for this twin leading shoe type of drum brake system, which, to be fair, still had very good stopping power for an old school braking setup. But as you're already aware, I'm certainly not a big fan of black wheels on a classic dirt bike, but then that's just my own personal opinion, because I always think that you just can't beat a nice pair of chrome or polished alloy wheels on one of these old race bikes. But nevertheless, who am I to actually condemn other people's tastes and how their bikes should look? And Adrian's went ahead and fitted a nice pair of SM Pro Platinum rims to complement the look of his big Husky. Now, normally on these 510 Husky motors, you'd have a pair of twin pipes coming from that twin port cylinder head, which usually then led into a connecting pipe that ran down either side of the bike, and eventually finishing with a big bore tailpipe on each side. just underneath the rear mudguard. But Adrian's joined up that right hand side header pipe onto this left sided pipe by way of a connecting pipe that he's made just underneath the carburetor here, which then of course gives him a 2-into-1 system with just a single big bore tailpipe here on the left hand side. So again, this 2-into-1 system certainly saves a bit of weight on the bike, and I'll bet that it sounds absolutely fantastic through this big bore alloy tailpipe when that Husky motor gets fired up. Although the number one project on this 1986 Husky chassis was all about swapping the single monoshock rear end for a double twin shock suspension system here at the back, which involved the removal of the top and bottom shock mountings that housed the old, or is that the new suspension unit, and then of course welding on top mounts on either side of the frame, and of course bottom mounts on this alloy swing arm as well to take those very high quality Öhlins piggyback twin shocks. But if you'd like an idea of how this bike handles on the track with this brand new setup, then there's plenty of racing footage that you can take a look at if you just check out the recent trackside racing from that Northern Ireland charity scramble. And the races that you're looking for in that particular video are the adult twin shock grade A class. But this suspension swap's certainly been professionally done, and Adrian's well pleased with the initial setup because the bike was running in the top 3 in that twin shock class when it was being piloted by Adrian's son Chris in Northern Ireland. And so moving on to this fuel tank that's fitted onto Adrian's bike now. I know that you're all just sitting out there patiently waiting on me telling you exactly what make, model and year of bike that this fuel cell's from, but the simple answer to that question is I just haven't got a clue. And to compound the mystery even further, Adrian said that he hasn't a clue either. So there's certainly some homework for all of you YouTube know-it-alls out there, just to try and help identify which bike that this is from. But it's almost certainly from a more modern machine that allows the seat to creep up the rear of that tank. And again, it looks fantastic, all repainted in these Husqvarna colours. And I can certainly understand how Adrian doesn't know the identity of this fuel tank and this quite plush seat as well, because both of these parts did come with the original 1986 bike when Adrian first bought it. So in this case, I'd expect that at least the previous owner would know their model or origins. It's just that Adrian wasn't exactly furnished with that information when he handed over the cash when he first bought the bike. But up at the business end of our big Husky thumper, it's a decent pair of rental twin wall handlebars that Adrian's fitted, and all of the bike's control cables are high quality Venhill items. Now naturally, to control all of the ponies waiting to be let loose on that big massive 510 4-stroke motor, you certainly need a steady hand on this Swedish Gunnar Gasser throttle twist grip to try and keep the bike's speed in check. And the bike's clutch and front brake levers are also your Pro Taper parts with their gold alloy anodized adjusters there as well. And also to help you get that 510 thumper motor into the right position for starting, we also have this very handy decompressor lever, which is an essential part to have in place when you're firing up one of these big 4-stroke engines. But it's probably pretty fair to say that Adrian is into his old Swedish Husqvarnas, because on the day that I grabbed these clips, he'd also brought along a few more bikes to race, including a nice 83 250 there, another 250 CR, and also a big 430 as well. So a very nice assortment of Swedes in Adrian's paddock. But without doubt, our big 510 was certainly the pick of the bunch, and although some people may still think that it's a bit of a crime to chop up a more modern 86 monoshock bike just to put old school twin shocks and drum brakes onto it, but in the past I've seen this kind of thing done on the old YZ490 Yamahas, and more especially those big 480 Hondas as well. So it's certainly not a new thing, and it's becoming increasingly popular among many twin shock racers. So whether you actually like this or loathe it, there's certainly no escaping the fact that it's still a cracking looking bike that has the performance to match, judging by its eventual race positions and results after it was raced at this Northern Ireland event. But as I said, if you want to take a closer look at Adrian's big twin shock Husky perform on the racetrack, then just check out the twin shock grade A class races from the recent Northern Ireland Charity Scramble from 2023. Well, there you have it, another interesting motorcycle, not a fully original bike of course, but that's Adrian Lappin's 1986 Husqvarna 510. A bike was originally of course a monoshock machine that Adrian converted to be used as a twin shock racer. So coming up next here on my channel, another very rare and interesting machine, and when we return we'll be taking a look at this lovely Rickman G50 Matchless. Now this was a bike that was built by Adrian Moss of Rickman Motorcycles, and we're going to delve deeper into the internal workings of this bike when we come back to CDB TV. So if you're not already a subscriber to my channel, then I do hope you will do that very small thing in order that you don't miss out on any future videos that I post. But for the time being, from all of us here at CDB TV, it's goodbye for now.